There was a time in the early 2000s where love was everywhere around us. Rom-coms plagued our screens, and I remember as a young child watching those same movies over and over again, swooning at the romantic marvels that I saw on screen and hoping that one day I would too have my very own fairy tale romance. However, I think that is probably one of the worst things that I could have done to myself. Now, don't get me wrong, I love these movies and some of them still remain my favorites, but I do think that watching them altered my notion of love and my expectations for it. And I don't think I'm the only one that has gone through this soul-crushing realization that the love that we see on screen is rather unreal, or more than unreal, it is hyperreal. Well, what is hyperreality, you might be asking yourself? Hyperreality is a term proposed by French philosopher Jean Baudrillard that refers to how society has started to imitate a copy of reality. A great example of this are TV shows. At some point, they base themselves around reality, emulating it and depicting it in an exaggerated version. But now we have taken this media and started to model our lives around it. We take quizzes to see if we're more of a Serena or a Blair, and in essence start to copy a depiction of reality, thus making our reality hyperreal, a copy of a copy. In All About Love, author Bell Hooks describes how through the past years, we have started to shape our lives after pop media instead of it being the other way around. Our expectations for life and love have been based on what we have grown up watching in the cinemas, which is not an accurate representation of reality, thus making our expectations incredibly unrealistic too. So by now you might be thinking, well, what is wrong with believing in a movie like Romance? And to answer this question, let's look at one of the most popular theories that pop culture has popularized, which is the theory of the one, the soulmate theory. The soulmate theory is first presented in Plato's Symposium. In Symposium, Plato argues that humans were originally four-legged and four-armed beings with one head. He said that at the time, there were three sexes. One had two male bodies, one had two female bodies, and one had one of each. Plato says that they attempted to climb Olympus and take down the gods, so in revenge, Zeus split them in half. Since then, he says that humans have felt empty, and thus dedicated the rest of their lives to search for their missing half, for their soulmate. The thing is that like most of Plato's theories, it has had a tremendous impact on our society as it developed, but as years passed by, the entirety of the theory was lost, but the idea at its core was diluted to the thought of soulmates, and it has since remained in our society, evidently portrayed in movies and in films, especially in rom-coms.
Sorry.
You want these?
No,
go ahead.
please.
That's the last one. Miss, do you have another pair of these black cashmere gloves?
Whatever's out is what we have. You don't have a stockroom? No.
Or basement?
No. We don't have an attic either.
Listen, you take them. I don't need them.
No. You saw them first.
Please, I insist.
Serendipity is a 2001 rom-com that tells the story of Jonathan and Sarah, two people who happen to meet while reaching for the same pair of gloves while Christmas shopping at Bloomingdale's. After their meet-cute, they continue to spend time together to then have Sarah reveal that she believes that fate sends little signals that she lets determine many of her life decisions. After they go ice skating, Jonathan asks Sarah for her number, but the slip of paper that she writes it on blows away, so Sarah says that was a signal of fate that they were not meant to be. But when Jonathan disagrees, Sarah decides that she will let fate decide whether that is or is not valid. Years later, both of them are engaged, yet they decide to embark on a crazy journey to find each other. Thus, we get to see their crazy attempts to encounter until the end of the movie, where after Jonathan calls off his wedding, he's able to encounter with Sarah. As it turns out, it was all the way fate desired it to be. It was their destiny to be together. Yes, it's a wonderful, sappy movie about finding your one true love, your soulmate, the person the universe decided that you were meant to be with. But although this is a lovely concept, and I'm sure Plato agrees, serendipity is a movie after after all. It is a copy of reality, and it is fair that it depicts unrealistic standards for love and life. But the problem comes when we as society start trying to emulate this and start engaging with the hyperreal more than with what we engage with in our own reality. And what a better and more oxymoronic way than to show why this is an issue than with yet another movie, and this time one of my personal favorites.
I love the Smiths.
Sorry?
I said I love the Smiths.
500 Days of Summer tells the story of Tom, a man who, like many of us, has learned everything they know about love from pop culture. Tom is a romantic. He believes in soulmates and in the one, because it is what pop culture taught him. But then enters Summer, who, for the lack of a better word, is a bit of a cynic. She doesn't have unrealistic expectations for love, but rather she expects pain, because her main school for love was her parents' divorce. So when these two meet and Tom decides that Summer is the love of his life, we get to see the unfolding of it all. Tom idealizes Summer, and in her, he puts off his unfair and hyperreal expectations of love. We can see them in this black and white daydream movie scenes, and in the expectation for the reality sequences. Tom has a hyperreal idea for love, and thus for Summer. So when he meets the harsh reality that Summer is not what he wanted her to be, enters heartbreak. This movie perfectly captures the hyperrealization of the soulmate theory and what happens when we start engaging with hyperreality more than with what is real. But the soulmate theory is just an example. Pop media has set thousands of unrealistic expectations and standards that have completely tampered with our view of love and life. Much like Tom, many of us find ourselves in situations where we have quite high or simply unrealistic expectations in regards to love because of our constant interaction with the hyperreal. Now, don't get me wrong, I am no cynic. I know that so far all I have done is bash the popular and dreamlike concept of love that pop media has given us. But it is not because I hate it or because I feel bitter, but it's rather because that I am concerned for love. Nowadays, I think that we're growing to be quite the loveless society. Heartbreak songs are some of the most popular, and everyone seems to be getting divorced, and depression rates have only seemed to be growing in the last few years. Now, I do know that not all of these factors rely solely on our growing lovelessness, but it has contributed. The thing with hyperreality is that it's not, and it hardly ever is, real. By trying to imitate something that inherently cannot be generated within our own reality, we place unfair expectations not only on ourselves, but on those surrounding us. When these expectations get crushed by reality, we become hurt. And thus, we tend to isolate ourselves, fueling our growing loneliness and lovelessness. Not only this, but often we become angry at those who cause the expectations to be crushed, hence wounding them too with the anger of our actions or words.
I think technically the girl of my dreams would probably have like a really bodacious rack, maybe different hair. Probably, she'd probably be a little more into sports, but truthfully, Robin's better than the girl of my dreams. She's real.
I am not precisely saying that we need to lower our standards or change our entire perception on love, but rather that we can learn to love a bit differently. What I would like to call the medicine to our growing lovelessness, a sweet cure for a sour problem, is quite simple in theory, but it's harder in practice. It is loving authentically. In her book, The Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir writes, "Authentic love must be founded on reciprocal recognition of two freedoms. Each lover would then experience himself as himself and as the other. Neither would abdicate his transcendence. They would not mutilate themselves. Together, they would both reveal values and ends in the world." With the introduction of hyperreality to our world, we have grown accustomed to shaping others and ourselves to fit what we want to love and what others desire to love. But this does us no good. Loving authentically, on the other hand, is all about loving what is real, loving the individuality of each other. We need to understand that people are not blank canvases that we can project our dreams and desires to, and they're not extensions of ourselves either. People are unique and they're individuals, and this uniqueness and individuality is what makes people so lovable and so special. It is hard to reshape our ideas in love, and it is much easier said than done, but we can try to learn to love authentically and not let the movies shape our lives forever.